This is in continuation to what I had explained in terms of the management, the need for the management to understand people and how the society and other kinds of structures affect the behavior in organization. Here in this part, we will be talking mostly about the organizational structure and how the vertical structure is sometimes facilitatory and sometimes quite destructive to the organizational existence and its processes. So, we now will be focusing on the authority part and the structure of the organization. Now, the structure of organization, if you take the what you call traditional view, basically is derived from the early instructions of Henry Fayol, a Frenchman, where he had given 14 principles of organizational management. And we are borrowing from Fayol's contribution. Basically, we have the chain of command. Chain of command means that the direction of instructions, what is to be done, flows from the top to the bottom, that is from the staff to the line. This is chain of command. The other is span of control. Span of control is the relationship, organizational relationship of subordinates to superiors. In very simple terms, who dictates to whom and who listens to whom. So, authority basically, we have to remember, authority is institutional and not personal. Let us not confuse the two. If you are the boss, you are an institutional boss, not in personal life, and this is a mistake mostly committed by people who go to higher levels, higher echelons of organizational hierarchy, and they also start treating, even in their personal life, their subordinates from organizational perspective in terms of the command, their rule, and they create a kind of a invalid, I won't call it bad, invalid environment around their personal life, around their social life. So, the top boss is not the top boss in society, we have to remember that. And whatever authority even the CEO has is from institutional framework. Say in a university structure, the vice chancellor is the top boss, but when outside the university, he is not the top boss. But people have this tendency of not forgetting their authority in organization and trying to extend it to their personal life. And one of the reasons, this is out of context here, but not really so, the post-retirement depression, when you are totally bound by your organizational authority and you retire from the place, you do not find a space, you do not find the earth under your feet, because what you were used to behave in is no longer possible. So, always remember that the CEO, even the CEO has the delegated authority from the institutional framework, it is not his personal property. Now, one thing we have to understand and remember as a manager, as a human being, as a student, that authority is not empty, it is just not giving commands. Authority generates responsibility. If you are given the authority, you must know that there is responsibility attached to that authority. And the CEO, for example, is ultimately responsible for any act of either omission or commission in the organization. So, greater the authority, more the responsibility. And one thing very interesting, you have to remember that authority can be delegated, but not the responsibility. You can put somebody in your place when you are absent, but that person is not responsible for your acts and your responsibilities. So, if authority is more than responsibility, then it may be abused. If you are not responsible for your action and you say you have the authority, this is the malady with all the, most of the, not all, most of the political authorities. They extend their authority and they do not feel responsible for their acts. This is the abuse of authority. And if the responsibility is more than authority, then things become very difficult. It cannot be complied. If you do not have the responsibility which should be attached to the authority, then you are in trouble. Authority usually flows from top to bottom, is the top-down approach. Both the forefathers of management and organizational behavior, Chester Bernard and Mary Parker Follett, the whole emphasis by these authors is that the authority and orders, if they are accepted by subordinates, the organization becomes effective. This is a traditional view of understanding organizational behavior, that whatever the authority says, the subordinate must respond to them in the manner that is expected. But this is a very static view of organization. We have to get away and progress in a different direction. Then why? The question comes why? Why the authority is always not effective if it is top down? I am not saying that it is not at all effective if it is top down, because there will be chaos if it is not top down. But in what conditions the bureaucratic setup where authority is top and rest orders are bottom down, to certain extent the specialization and division of labor, they may increase efficiency and productivity. The example that I would like to give you is, if there are no laws which is bureaucratic in nature, passed by the parliament, accepted by the system, then there will be a huge chaos in society. Same way, if there are no rules in the organization, then it is going to affect adversely the efficiency and productivity of the organization. But at the same time, it can create conflict between specialized units. Which is more important, the production and or the marketing? The traditional conflict between each saying they are more important. And if this continues, because the organization, if it is rule bound, then it has to create that setup where one is on the top of the other. Without production there is no marketing, without marketing production is not at all effective. So, the detriment, the what you call lower down status happens if there is line staff conflict due to bureaucracy. So, this conflict at any cost has to be avoided, and this is the responsibility of the organizational functionaries who are looking at the process not from a very rigid point of view, and we will also progress in understanding the bureaucracy and its dysfunctions. But at no point we have to believe that bureaucracy is all that bad. Bureaucracy, if it is practiced in a proper manner, then it is going to be quite effective. Continuing with the same thought, we have to understand what is hierarchy. This hierarchy is basically unity of command. You cannot have very many variations in command. So, command has to be unified and properly distributed, given, and this is done by coordinating the activities of people in organization. This command reinforces authority, responsibility and accountability chain, because without responsibility and accountability, authority is meaningless. And another advantage in this hierarchy is we know where to seek information directions, that is known as the formal system of communication. In times of difficulty, you know whom to contact, who is the person who is responsible. If it is clearly mentioned, then the organizational functioning becomes quite smooth. And the problem is that in this hierarchical communication, there is no recognition of informal communication. We do not try to take the cognizance of what is happening from an informal point of view. So, informal communication, which is very important for maintaining the morale of the organization's workers, people, members, that becomes absent. Another problem is that the hierarchy is supposed to be both downward as well as upward, but if you analyze the organizations, you will find that there is only downward emphasis. People are not really ready to listen to their subordinates. The chain goes downward only, whereas the hierarchy is both. It can be from top down and bottoms up, which is a later development, but this you have to keep in mind. And in this kind of structure, what happens is that the individual initiatives and the readiness to participate are often blocked. People are not listened to, and the upward communication is negatively affected, meaning that the people who are at a line level, people who are actually involved in doing the functions, they are not listened, because the people who are their bosses are not ready and they are not given the kind of recognition they merit. So, this is another issue. I had told you earlier also that bureaucracy is not a term which is derogatory. The problem is that the ideal bureaucrat never exists in reality, because after all we are all human beings. So, people at top cannot be all the time impersonal. The personal part, like we see the issues of people being ingratiated, people favoring their own, this is becoming personal. Bureaucracy and personal aspects should never go hand in hand. So, the top boss can not always be impersonal and follow the rules only. And the ideal bureaucrat we don't see. Ideal bureaucrat means that the person who knows the rules, who knows the regulations and can practice the rules and regulation without any personal bias. After all, we are all human beings. The human bias, we can say, becomes a part, and this part is detrimental to the running of any organization. And you can see it in all organizations, they cannot be impartial. They are not impartial. And another problem, rules are supposed to be non-discriminatory and inviolate, meaning that the rules are not biased. They do not discriminate between two segments. Again, this is becoming almost impossible because some rules may be very very much beneficiary for one group and non-beneficiary for the other group. So, the management has to understand where to bend the rules and justify with responsibility this kind of bending of the rules. But the problem that you all know, that the rules have become a red tape which has come, this whole metaphor has red tapeism has come from the traditional files in offices bound by red ribbon. So, that becomes the red tape, everything is hidden there and all the openness goes away from the window. Maintaining the rules become more important than the goals the rules are created for. We can see it in all segments, whether it is public oriented or whether it is private oriented. It is following the rules for the sake of rules, not for the sake of the goals, and that is why change is a must, and then bureaucratic system actually inhibits the change. And another issue is the delay and distortion in communication becomes a rule by itself under bureaucracy. Everything is delayed. Every person, if you go to the government offices, you will find nobody gives a direct answer. They will run to the rule book and they are scared of those rules. So, we cannot really blame the person in totality. It is when the rule becomes bound by the people, then it becomes a red tape. It inhibits the productivity, effectiveness rather than making it a facilitatory process. So, we have to understand these issues that are inherent in bureaucracy. Now, let us come to modern organization design. What is the change that has been brought? The first change that we find is by Likert, who created 4 systems, and from the autocratic authority, benevolent authority and so on, we have those linkages between group to group relations. What Likert understood, that simply following the bureaucratic rules, we are not going to achieve the efficiency at the individual level, at the group level, and effectiveness at the organizational level, that is its role in promoting the beneficial aspects of the society for growth, development in a positive direction. So, by creating the whole approach towards the group relations, individual to individual relations, Likkert's system, Likkert's design tries to break from both horizontal boundaries as well as vertical linkages. What he proposes in brief is the linking pin theory, which means that how the different groups, whether production, marketing, finance, anything, how the different groups at a macro level relate to the other groups, and within the group, so the finance group, different variations in responsibilities and acts, how they are linked to each other. By understanding this linkage, the whole process of organizational functioning, effectiveness becomes a possibility. And the best known system of Likkert is system 4, where the emphasis is on individual to individual vis-a-vis groups relationship. If there is, say for example, a social group, a club, it does not remain a club outside the organization. It has to get linked to the organization and facilitate the functioning of the organization in a positive manner. This is the gist of linking pin theory of Likkert. Then when we look at the other aspects, the first thing, let me remind you that the whole open system approach actually destroyed or killed the bureaucratic order, and in the open system we find that the organization is not just limited to the boundary, to its own boundary, but it is also related to the external system. To give you an example, the factories that need water are usually established on the banks of a river, and they pollute the river. Why this has happened? Because the internal system, that is the factory, has not actually related to the external system, that is the environment. So, there has to be a linkage. The organization, environment dependency, information processing, all these imperatives, they are affecting the organization structure and creating a need to be more flexible. So, if you are polluting the river, you have to create that infrastructure to clean the water before it is given to river, because river is the mainstay of human life, social life. So, you have to be proactive. You just cannot set up an factory anywhere you like, first thing, and then do not look at the impact, the negative as well as the positive. We only look at the people, they look at the financial part, not in the holistic way. The contingency approach of we have already talked about, that the role of organization differentiation and integration, that is where the contingency approach works. And Galbraith, an economist, a world known economist, he says that when the organization structures are organic, they face uncertainty. So, to be able to face the uncertainty, the organization has to change its structure, modify it and have a vision to not to be permanent, but not to create negative impacts on the world, on the society. And the decision tree model by Duncan, it talks about the static and dynamic organization structures, where the complexity is a main characteristic of dynamic organization, which is difficult to bear with, and certainty is the mainstay of static organization, which can create lots of difficulties for the society and organization. And the project design, that is the main emphasis these days, that people are more engaged not towards certainty, but taking projects and ending projects and then going with a new perspective. Thank you.